Hello, everyone. This is Aaron Lamar, the coach, and I'm here with two awesome special guests. Both have appeared on coaches sessions before. I have Ginger Healy and Jenny McKee. How you guys doing tonight?
Great.
Doing awesome tonight. How are you?
I'm doing good. A little rough day today, as it always is for teachers. But hey, my wife and coach always told me, tomorrow's a new day. Doing those coping skills that I learned. Ginger, your book is awesome. I'm learning a lot of skills. And Jenny, you always have an upbeat attitude, so always a good day. All right, so I'm going to get started here. My first question is for you, Jenny. So first question here. So at my little context here, at my school, we're going to have a puberty talk coming up. So they're 10 and 11 years old for fifth graders. In your opinion, how important is it to have that puberty talk for fifth graders, especially since oftentimes kids hear about sex and relationships from unreliable sources? Sometimes, the internet's at their fingertips, so they're looking up things, they're getting false info, they're watching things they shouldn't be. They don't get accurate taste of reality of what that actually is. So, in your opinion, how crucial is it for those fifth graders to have a puberty talk at their school?
I'm so glad that you brought up the fact that our young people have the world at their fingertips, pretty much 24/7, a lot of them. So, I believe that from a sexual health educator perspective, I believe it's incredibly important to have that fact-based puberty health education moment with them in fifth grade. And I think that there are messages, educational messages that we can be giving young people at all ages and stages. So, yes, I love that we're having it in fifth grade. And I think that our schools and our families could really do a better job at introducing that information, age appropriate information, starting as soon as your child you feel is ready and open to learning that kind of information. Now, the fact that it's taking place in schools, I think that it's awesome. The more people that a young person has in their lives that are there to give them facts, they can tell care and support them, is really just going to increase the overall wellness of that individual. The more people that a student, a young person feels like cares about them and is there for them, gives them more options to talk to trusted individuals about things that they might be going to. Also, we know that different family systems have different beliefs and values. And sometimes the way a child is feeling about growing up or puberty might not align with their family system's values and beliefs. So, if they can get a different kind of support or message from a trusted person at school, that can oftentimes be very validating.
Oh, yeah, of course. And that actually ties into my next question for you, Ginger. So, if you're having a puberty talk and you have students that come from a traumatic background, what are different approaches teachers can do to avoid maybe triggering them? I know a lot of our students, especially at this age, are very sensitive. Fifth graders. What are some techniques an expert can do to avoid these triggers?
I think what Jenny said set us up perfectly for that because it's about safe relationship with someone that you can trust that is going to support you in the event that you are triggered. And you may not, some kids, when they are triggered or dysregulate, you know immediately, but a lot of them you don't. You really have no idea. We call these kids like silent sufferers, that hold it inside or that mask and want to appear as if everything's calm. They don't want any attention. They don't want any spotlight. They want to fly under the radar, especially if there's an topic of conversation like this that can be kind of embarrassing or kind of uncomfortable, or there's awkward giggling or all these things. It's like, can we just, get through this conversation, even though it's so important and so needed? So you may not know if a student is going to get triggered or not. So it's all about creating that safe environment. And I'm talking about of course, physical safety, but also more importantly, emotional safety. This is a safe place. We're going to talk about things that may or may not make you feel uncomfortable or bring about some feelings. You can say that out loud, like here's what's going to happen. And if you have questions or concerns or thoughts, most kids probably aren't going to raise their hands and ask. And so you can offer opportunities to write a question down anonymously, or talk to them privately afterwards, or so many different things that just let them know this is a safe place. This is cool. We're going to talk about whatever you would like to ask questions about. Or a lot of students sometimes might think about it later and then have a question, or the processing might be delayed because in that moment in the talk, a lot of kids, they're not able to really just be present and take in the information. It's really hard to do that, especially in a group of peers where it's a possibly uncomfortable situation. And so all of the processing and thinking about it and good talks sometimes come afterwards. So hopefully they have someone at home they can talk to about it. But if not, a teacher, a coach, a safe adult that they can trust to create that environment where if they get triggered, I just don't want educators to worry about not triggering, because I think they're already doing their best not to do that. No one would purposefully do that. Hopefully, I don't think so. So you can't necessarily control what triggers a student and what doesn't. It could be anything, a sight, a sound, a smell, anything. And so it's about helping the student handle the trigger when it's happening or after it's done, because the trigger is not the problem. The stress isn't the problem. You can't control that, but you can control how to manage it and how to create the safety and how to provide that environment where you kind of might be able to tell they need to talk about it after, or suggest someone or a resource or a support who can do that, so that they're not left alone in that feeling, in that triggered feeling.
Oh yeah, that's why I'm happy my school has 2 awesome social workers in the building. But everybody, all the staff is great. Yeah, I just think it back when I was in Jenny's class. I remember me and my friend would talk about, because she was in the class too, how there was a couple awkward topics there that kind of made me uneasy. I'm like, yeah, I know, even college students go through it. So
yes.
trust me, I know. And so that leads me to another question for you, Jenny. So I know you work with college and older students, but hypothetically, what would you tell a 5th grader that asks you, how do I know if I'm ready for sex? I know, again, they're way too young. I know that. But if they were just curious about, how do I know when I'm ready, maybe for my first kiss, or maybe to hug, or to even have a boyfriend or girlfriend at that age, just what would you tell them? What advice?
So, yes, I mean, I think all of us in this space right now would agree that if a 5th grader is asking us how, what kind of signs or things would help them know whether they're ready for sex, internally, we all might be like, baby, no, you're not ready. You're just too young. I just want to introduce the idea that sometimes people that ask this question at this age may potentially have already had sexual experiences that are non-consensual. And so to really be mindful of the way that we respond to people when they're at this age and stage and they're asking these questions, because they're gauging our response to see how we're going to value them, how we are going to engage with them or ask them. And so I think as a sexual health educator, my first question, my first response would be, that's an interesting question. What makes you think that you are ready for sex? Or can you tell me more? Is there someone that you're thinking about? I would try to help them explore that without putting value or a judgment on letting them know whether or not I think they're ready, because there might be things that are already happening to them then, or even earlier in life, unfortunately. And what we know about childhood sexual molestation or assault is that most of the time it's someone that they know or someone that's related to them, and potentially, then also someone that they love or even a caretaker. So we don't want to respond in a way that is, negative, or, that's an outrageous question, or don't do that, or you're too young. I think doing some exploration with them of like, that's an interesting question. What makes you think that or ask that? I also think at this point, at age and stage, it's so important to be focusing on healthy relationships. And so starting there of like, well, I know that, ideally, for people to most healthfully engage in sexual activity, they also have a really strong foundation of healthy relationships. And then ask, questions about what kinds of relationships that they see, maybe on TV or in movies, or maybe in their own personal lives, that they think are rock star relationships, and asking them what features make them think that those are really healthful relationships. But starting with that piece, I think, is really important. Obviously, encouraging them to wait as long as possible might be appropriate depending on your relationship with them. I think it is safe to know, or to tell a young person without using scare tactics, that sexual activity comes with some real emotional and physiological risks that are undeniable. And depending on the kind of relationship or the sexual attraction that individual has, and we don't know that, maybe they don't even know that yet either, I think it's important when you have that conversation to try as much as you can to not make assumptions about the kinds of sex that they're talking about, or who they'd be sexually active with, or even not to make an assumption that they know what sex is. I can tell you that, yes, I do teach college students, and very few of them have received fact-based comprehensive sex education. Only 38 states and the District of Columbia require comprehensive sex education. So I don't think we can make any assumptions about what that young person is asking us, which is why doing some investigation with them in a loving, caring way will, number one, help you understand what exactly they're talking and asking about. Number two, might bring up some of those pieces that Ginger was talking about, like you don't know what's going to be a source of trauma or a trigger. So maybe sussing some of that out, but also you're teaching that student that you are a trusted person that they can talk to, and they're not going to come at you with, prescriptive or directive kinds of conversations. Is that helpful?
Oh yeah, it is helpful. Speaking of investigation, asking questions, that actually ties into Ginger's next question. Uh, if a child wants more information regarding puberty due to their trauma, though, they can't ask their parent, teacher, or any professional at the school. Like they just don't feel comfortable asking the social worker. What are their options? What can they do?
Yeah, I mean, we sadly know that the rate of childhood adversity, whether it be because of sexual abuse or other things, are higher than we want it to be. And so many children have experienced adversity. And so that may mean that they don't have someone in the home that they can have important conversations with, or just, that basic safety. So hopefully, if that's the case, what the school can do is watch out for these kids and surround them, and help provide resources and support, whether it be a school social worker or a school counselor or a teacher or a coach that is trusted and safe. If and it is normal and natural for children not to want to talk about anything that has happened to them, not to understand it, not to there can be so much shame surrounding it, so much internal blame, especially if someone has told them that it is their fault. There's just so many reasons. And so it is really all about relationship and finding someone. If there's got to be at least one, and Harvard Center for the Developing Child says it really only takes one to help heal a child and build their resilience. So we don't have to surround and get a lot of support, but is there someone they can connect to? Is there someone who can buffer that adversity, and be safe and meet those needs? And I'll tell you what, most kids, it's just more comfortable these days not to talk to adults about tough things and to go to a friend or the internet. And we all know what they're going to find on the internet, especially when it comes to this topic. And Jenny's already talked about that. It's not fact-based, and it can be potentially more traumatizing, re-traumatizing, from what they've already gone through. So the thing is, it's about that trust. And so if a child will trust a peer or an adult that is safe and has their back, then that's how we support that child and give them that fact-based information. Otherwise, they're going to get it from other sources. So we can't also just not worry about it and let time go by and avoid, we do need to be intentional about making sure kids don't fall through the gaps. So I don't know if that answers your question, and I don't necessarily have all the answers, but I definitely think there are options, there are resources, there is support. But I do think we have to be intentional about it, because I don't know that kids will intentionally seek out. They're not developmentally probably able to find that right person on their own, At least I'm thinking about my kids. And even I had a conversation with my son today just about something that was not, a topic like sex education. It was just, can you talk to your teacher about that problem that you're having on the math assignment? And he was like, no, I'm not going to talk to my teacher. He said, I'll email him, but I think our social skills and communication skills these days are different with our kids. And so we have to get creative. Kids can email an adult, but it has to be done in a safe context, in this, monitored, supervised relationship that is appropriate and follows those boundaries and guidelines. If a face-to-face conversation is terrifying for a kid, and most of the time it is, then what can we do? Can we do parallel conversations where we're not even looking each other in the eye? We're just doing something, parallel play, talking. How you doing? Do you have any questions? No pressure, right? No stress, no coercion. Just, I'm here. If you have any questions, what do you think about that? And that type of environment.
Well, yeah, I think you answered the question very well, actually. I think both of you are doing a great job answering these questions that I have prepared for you. Honestly, these are things I haven't even thought I would never even consider thinking about. So yeah, great info. It can be, especially since, a lot of them just live on their phones now and their iPads, then they don't want to look up and actually ask the question, and then they're shy in person or reserved. And I could definitely relate to that. So yeah, it can be having that one person you can actually build a connection with and a relationship with, and then you're like, okay, maybe I can actually ask this person that question, and then they're willing to help out the best that they can. But yeah, I like that. Thank you, Ginger. My next question for you, Jenny. So I'm sure I know the answer to this, but have you ever had a student in your class approach you for advice about sex or relationship help? For example, like arguing, compromising, anything along those lines?
Yes, absolutely. And before I answer that question, I wrote a note down when Ginger was so beautifully responding to your last question and making that point. about how our students are usually Googling answers to things, and they might be really uncomfortable asking who could be a trusted person who's standing right in front of them. And I know that we, wring our hands about like, I was right here, why didn't you ask me? Why didn't you tell me? Since we are forecasting that our students are going to be reticent to connect with us face to face, I think it's important that in these early conversations, in addition to being an individual who provides judgment-free, fact-based information, if we know that they're a lot more likely to look up things on the internet, let's provide them with good internet resources if they're going to go there anyways. So think about places online that you will feel safe sending your students to. And I know what those places are for me at the collegiate level. I know where I can send students, but I think that they're probably similar to some degree to the places that you might want to send someone in middle school and high school. Because if they have questions about contraception or preventing STIs or about seeking help, if they feel like they're in an unsafe environment or someone is causing them harm, you'll want them to get connected to people as soon as possible. So just wanted to put that out there as our parents are preparing for their students to get this information, and our teachers, not just the people delivering the puberty talk, but all teachers are like aware of the internet resources that they should have at the ready. Post them. Don't make it a taboo, like a piece of paper that they get. Put it on the whiteboards, put it in the parent newsletters. The reasons kids have a hard time talking about sex is because their parents and their teachers have a hard time talking about sex. So this isn't a kid problem. This is a parent in United States Western society problem, which is incredibly ironic because sex sells everything, but we're very puritanical about it. So sorry. I just got on my high horse about that. But so often we as adults, we have all this power and leverage, and we're like pushing all of the problems onto the people that have the littlest, like fewest amount of agency in our society. And I think that we need to turn that on its head. So yes, now I will answer your question. Have you ever had a student, have I ever had a student in my class approach and ask advice about sex, relationship help? Absolutely, all the time. Every class period, I either get an email or someone who's like, "Hey, can I bend your ear about this?" 100%. And I open myself up to that because I teach a human sexuality class where we cover lots of different topics, including healthful relationships. I have to be really careful with my scope of practice, however. I am a community health educator and more specifically, a sexual health educator. I'm not a therapist or a relationship or marriage counselor. And so at the outset, when a student asks me for relationship help, I make sure that they know that that's where I'm coming from. That being said, I can still utilize brief motivational skills to help them come to a solution that makes sense for them. And that means asking lots of questions so they are doing most of the talking and I am doing most of the listening. I got to tell you, when people ask questions about the healthfulness of the relationship, it's usually because they know the answer, and they don't want to talk about it. They want to be they want someone else to say the thing they don't want to hear. But what research shows is that people are most likely to believe things that they hear themselves say. And so if you ask the right questions, you will usually help the person who's standing in front of you, or you're, emailing with. They will usually come to the conclusion of what is what the solution needs to be. But I do think it's okay to, ask some questions if your student is talking about red flag behavior. If you're hearing things that remind you of things that sound like intimate partner violence, which is a term that we use instead of domestic violence, especially for people that are not married, that don't live in the same domicile, intimate partner violence. So using coercion, whether that be financially or otherwise, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, potentially even sexual abuse, depending on your demographics, even using things like racist or xenophobic kind of commentary to control a relationship. I think it's okay to say, like, that doesn't sound like, a way that I would want you to be treated. I care about you and I care about how happy you are. That doesn't sound very happy to me. I think it's okay to do that. Now, for people that your folks, I mean, like fifth graders, I can't speak to this, and maybe Ginger can, or maybe, Coach, you already know the answer to this. I don't know when the red flags go up high enough to where you have the, you're mandated to report that to other people because you're worried about someone's safety. I hope that's helpful, for sure, as far as answering questions.
Oh yeah, very helpful. Definitely, again, more things that I can relate to. So I think I'm pretty sure I asked you a few questions when I was there. But Ginger, my next question for you. What would you say to a college student who asks you for resources regarding their mental health and intimacy trauma?
I mean, I would celebrate, right? It is just so wonderful if a student asks for help, for resources, for support, especially surrounding mental health and intimacy trauma. That is wonderful, because I think oftentimes these things don't come to the surface until much later than we would want. We want to talk about these things before anything happens, right? In a preventative manner and in an affirming manner of what your boundaries are, what you want, what you need, rather than before you feel like, you've been hurt, or before anything happens, like what Jenny was talking about. So I do think in some regards we are talking about mental health and other things like intimacy trauma more than we have before. We used to never talk about these things. It was just, we were embarrassed, or there was shame surrounding it. There was victim blaming. And so in some regards, because I know that still happens, I love that we're talking about it more. We're openly saying there are resources, there are support. Do not suffer, and do not suffer in silence. And on college campuses, there are mental health centers, and there are many, many resources. And I think that college students can be looked at as vulnerable in that this may be the first time that they are away from home and figuring out identity things and who they are. Maybe this is their first time exploring sexually. And so there's just a lot going on, right?
Mhm.
For good and for vulnerable and risky situations. And anyway, Jenny's much more of an expert in that than I am, but I would just love for a student to ask for help, because there is help out there. And especially with intimacy trauma, that is so dangerous. That is one of the most risky situations for anyone to find themselves in. And so I don't know that I'm getting to your question in that, do you want specifics of what, but just that it is so good to talk about this, and to have students should know at every age, if you have a question, if you have a concern, if you're feeling uncomfortable about anything, who do you go to? Who can you talk to? Who's your safe people? That is so critical for just students at any age to know where to go and who to talk to, because it's going to depend on the situation, what the talk ensues and what resources and supports are offered, but just knowing it's available and just taking the shame out of it, that we can talk openly about things and dispel this myth that anything was your fault. If you were hurt in any way at all, there's no shame in talking about it, and no, I think there is fear to talk about it. And so we can really help dispel that fear by, being open and being able to create that atmosphere of, you can ask me anything. And there are certain things we can keep private, but I always give that talk about, there are certain things that I have to report. There are things that we will need to involve for your safety, but I'm not going to report anything and walk away. I'm here. I'm going to be here, and we're going to walk through this together, whatever it is.
No, that's great. I think you definitely answered my question. Honestly, if a college student came to me and asked, like, I don't want to say, oh, just go to YouTube, just Google it.
Yeah.
I'm saying, oh, well, you can actually go to my friend Ginger Healy. You can go to her website and get some information on that. I've actually did that a few times with some of my coworkers. Same thing, like, oh, hell, here's her email to Jenny. She can help you out with that more than I could, because I'm not trained in that. But yeah, that's just something I would say. But great. But now we're going to get to the Q&A session. Jenny, do you have any questions that you want to ask Ginger?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I guess, Ginger, I would be really curious about, in your practice, how frequently does mental health and issues related to sexuality and intimacy, how frequently do those things intersect? Is this something that's really common or something that's really rare?
I think that's a good question. I think it is common, and I think it depends, but if it there's so many ways to go about this, but if you were raised also in a home where we talk openly about things, that's going to be differently than if you were raised in a home where, you were punished for something like masturbation, or that it was, you don't talk about it, you don't do it. We don't even talk about it, anything like that, or sex before marriage. I mean, if there's a religious aspect, there's so many things that can play into sexual health that overlaps into mental health, because anytime that there is any fear-based or shame-based, I would say, discipline strategies or anything like that in the home, then you're going to see a correlation to anxiety and depression, right? And so we can really get to that and look at that and dive into that, if that's what I'm looking at if I'm working with someone, not necessarily the particulars of the sex talk, but of where these feelings came from that are causing any anxiety or depression or any mental health. Oftentimes, a lot of these mental health issues are going to go back to adversity in childhood and anything that happened before age of 18, when our brain is developing. And sex is a part of that. How we feel about it, how we talk about it, how we were raised, what we believe religiously, spiritually, there, that. And so again, I'm not sure that I'm getting to the question, except for to say that there is a huge overlap, and we should be mindful of the bigger picture, right? If that makes sense.
It does make sense. The reason that I wanted to ask that question, even though I felt like I knew the answer, is because I don't think a lot of people do know the answer to that question. And people are so quick to go to the doctor if there is something going on with their body, until it comes to their genitalia or anything sexual related. And I think that's true with our sexualities as well. Thankfully, there's a stigma that's starting to soften around some mental health issues, but we haven't quite gotten there when it comes to mental health and that intersection with sexuality. For some reason, we think that it's rare or that only, really weird or sick people have those kinds of issues, and that's simply not the case. So it's very meaningful to hear it from someone like you with your credentials and the work that you've done. So thank you for putting that message out there.
Hmm. That's interesting. I've never really been asked that question. And so I guess I've never really thought of it, but I didn't have to hesitate in saying absolutely, so I think I love this conversation.
Mm. Jenny, you have anything else you want to ask, or?
I think that was the really big one. Although I am curious, Ginger, how long you've been in your profession.
It's been about close to 30 years. I started out in child abuse investigations in the 90s, in the late 90s. It's been a long time.
It has to be very challenging work, and thank you for doing it. I can't imagine, the little checkups from the neck up that you need to do to take care of yourself so you can come back every day and do this work from day to day. I know it can be really hard. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you for saying that.
Of course. Thank you, Jenny. Ginger, is there anything that you like to ask Jenny?
Oh, yes. How much time do we have? Okay. If I'm going to boil it down to one question, like I would love a takeaway for a mom of kids of all ages, but how can I promote healthy sexual talking, exploration, just attitudes? Give advice to moms, like how, what would you tell moms about? And it's going to be different each age and stage. I get that, but like your best advice, for moms with their kids.
That's a really fantastic question. And it sounds like you already have a very good understanding in the sense that those messages are possible at all ages and stages. I heard you also already say responses to things that we see or the questions that we ask make a big difference. If we walk in on our child self-stimulating, the way that we respond to that can absolutely plant seeds in our children to their relationship with the healthfulness of their sexuality. And the less, amplified those can be, the more like that's natural, or does that feel good? That's great. I'm so glad that you have found a way to pleasure yourself. And in this household, we do that privately. I do that in my bedroom. You can do that in your bedroom, which is basically the conversation I had with my child when I walked into our living room and he was masturbating while watching a cartoon when he was 4 years old. That's kind of exactly, how that went. And he just hiked his little drawers up and walked to his bedroom and closed the door. And he came out when he was done. And it wasn't, there was no shame or embarrassment or anything about that. But I think normalizing the behavior or questions by not othering it, the behavior or the questions of, those are things that I've thought about, or those are sensations that I've also had too. That can be incredibly comforting to a young person, but always being open to their questions or to the conversation or watching that show or listening to that song, even when it makes us uncomfortable, or even when they are like, oh my gosh, mom, cringe, shut up. I don't want to talk about this with you. You have to keep putting it out there, because when they do need you, or, when they need you to buy those condoms, or when they need access to birth control, or they need access to abortive services or care, you want you to be the first person that they reach out to. And it's not easy, and it's okay to ask for help. OWL is an acronym for Our Whole Lives. That is a method of sex education. You can get trained in it, or there are different educators who are OWL trained. Look for those people. Look for people in your communities that you can do partnered sex education with. I'm so lucky to live in Douglas County, Kansas, and there is a local organization called Let's Talk that does parent-child sex education for children that are of this age range. Do it together. I hate that they're done separately. Other things that you can do is educate yourself on great resources, even if they're ones that make you uncomfortable. Some people get really uncomfortable about Planned Parenthood as an organization. By God, that place has done incredible work providing really great facts. You can type whatever question you have in and get a fact-based answer. People are most confident when they have facts to give the people that they care about. So equipping yourself with those facts, whether it be from Columbia University and Go Ask Alice, or thinking about OWL and Our Whole Lives, or Planned Parenthood, find a resource that aligns with you, but make sure it's based in facts. And find community. That's the other part of it, I think. Yeah, for sure. I love that question.
Yeah. And, it's a tricky one because we know that everyone has different feelings, values, beliefs. And so I like that you said figure it out and find what works for you, especially in community, but fact-based. I think that that's such a good message. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. A lot of students ask me how I got my job or how I got interested in sexual health education. And honestly, my mom was pregnant almost my entire childhood. I'm one of 11 children.
Yeah.
My parents were incredibly open with the way that they cared about each other. There was lots of kissing, smooching, touching, cuddling. And I also grew up in a rural community. So I saw a lot of mammals giving birth. I also saw a lot of mammals in the act of getting pregnant. And so for me, it was just kind of something normal that we talked about in my household. And so it was weird to me when I found out that that wasn't normal in other people's households. And I think it's a really incredible gift that my parents gave me. They also accidentally got pregnant when they were in college. And so I think that they, passed that idea on to us of, hey, if you want to have 11 kids, great. If you don't, here's how you make that not happen. And that really, set me on this pace of getting done what I wanted to career-wise, having the family that I wanted to have, and then making sure I passed that openness talking about sexuality to my son.
Well, of course. Well, Ginger, anything else you want to add before we wrap up here?
No, I think it's been illuminating and educational, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to meet you, Jenny, and to get to know you more, Erin, and to promote the work. So it's great.
Let's do it again sometime.
Oh, yes, of course. We'll definitely, hopefully, do it again in the future. Well, thank you guys so much for another great Coach's Sessions episode. Jenny, awesome time as always. Ginger, thank you so much. You guys brightened up my day, honestly. So close to Thanksgiving break. Got an 8-hour drive ahead of me back to Chicago. But I'm looking forward to it, though, to see my family, my brothers, sisters, mom and dad. It's going to be a good time. Just got to make it to the weekend. But of course. Well, thank you guys so much. And I will see you next time.
Okay, see